Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Claire Moon, and welcome to another rising sign horoscope. This time, we're going to be talking about Mercury and Jupiter and their opposition that they're sharing across Sagittarius and Gemini. It's kind of a 2-month story. So, I'm going to be throwing out dates today that are really going to span across November and December. And then I'm going to do a little introduction for what we're working with these planets. And then I'll get to rising sign horoscopes, so you can find that ahead, time stamped if you want to skip ahead. I invite everyone to stay for the general stuff because I think it helps. I think it helps because I'm not going to cover it as in depth for each individual one. So with that, I did do it slightly relevant, and it's going to become more and more relevant as we get into mid-December. But I do have a whole workshop on Jupiter's presence in Gemini, and especially that presence in Gemini square Saturn. So that is linked below. Check it out. My Jupiter square Saturn, Jupiter and Gemini square Saturn workshop. And that is going to, that'll really be if you're a completionist, if you like to go deep with stuff, that'll be there. It's $15. You can find it on Podia. So that's where that link will send you. If you are unfamiliar with me, welcome. I'm happy to see you here. And you can always find all my work on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. I always do readings. I've been doing readings. I will continue to do readings. You can get a birth chart reading, a forecasting session, looking at the year ahead. I have a number of tools, timing techniques that I use. My main teacher is Chris Brennan. I do Hellenistic astrology, but I synthesize in modern stuff too, which you will hear today. I have a discount code right now running through December 1st that is Ardent, ARD as in dog, ENT, Ardent, and that's going to be 15% off any of my services. Also have tutoring and mentoring if you're interested in that. If you're a student of astrology, I do have a cheat sheet below. If you're new to astrology and you want some assistance, some handy tables with planets and houses and significations and all that stuff, that's linked below with some other resources. Yeah, I think that's most of the announcements. Um, Let me bring up the chart, and I think we'll be ready to go. So one way to best use this information, we're going to be talking about rising signs today. And for anyone who's new to rising signs and house systems and all of those fancy words, we can always imagine, we always see this circle that's here, and it looks like this kind of abstract mandala. But really what it is this 3D sky at the moment of our birth that's been squished onto a 2D surface. And we've got the ascendant, we've got the descendant, our relative, pretty much east, pretty much west, where planets are rising and setting. And the rising sign is really important because this is in the east where planets are rising. And ancient astrologers were always very interested in what was rising, what was setting, when, what was culminating at the top of the sky, what was anti-culminating underneath us. They were always very interested in that. And the rising sign is where planets come into view for the first time that day, that in that moment. And so it becomes symbolic of the moment that you came in as well, your rising degree. And so you and that rising sign share something in common about who you are. So that's why I'm going to be using the rising sign today. You can use your sun sign if you want, that's fine. But I do feel like when we use the rising sign, we can get more specific about what areas of life these transits are actually going to show up in versus just generalities. We can get a little bit more specific with themes and topics that could come up. If you don't know your rising sign, that's a-okay. Head over, you can pause this video, go to Chani Nicholas's website. You can also go to astroseek.com, AstroDienst or astro.com. All of those have great chart generators that you can use. And Chani Nicholas's app or website. Their chart generator uses whole sign houses. I use whole sign houses. The rest use Placidus. It doesn't matter. That's fine. Just it'll come up with the same, it'll come up with the same rising sign. So get that. That's the best way to use this information today. And then a couple other notes on how best to use this information. Know that this is one layer of timing that happens over a birth chart. So transits, planetary transits, usually we talk about like the full moon, the new moon, retrogrades. Those are all transits. That's just one layer of timing, which I know if that's news, it's like, whoa, yeah, that was my reaction too. And so, okay, it's one part of the picture. So don't worry too much with whatever we talk about today. And then the other part of that as well is one of those other timing techniques actually helps us to identify its annual profections. What years of your life that Mercury and Jupiter are loud and important and doing more stuff that's apparent. It's not every year. It's not all the time, at least not by Hellenistic astrology standards. So if you are in an annual profection year that is activating Jupiter or Mercury, then this transit that we're going to, or these, I guess it's really just a set of transits. It's a few of them. This is going to be affecting you much more versus, let's say you look at your annual profections for the year from your ascendant, from your luminary of sect, from your lot of fortune, wherever you're looking from, and you're not seeing Mercury or Jupiter as time lords, then you don't have to worry about this as much. So stuff that we talk about today, you might notice it in your periphery, but it might not be the loudest story for you. So just so you know, it's more than just transits. And there are other ways that we can get a little bit more specific about how important is this particular transit for you personally. So those are some of the caveats I wanted to bring up, just so that everyone's aware. If that was all Greek and you're like, I don't know what profections are, this is ridiculous, I am overwhelmed. Don't worry about any of this. Don't worry about it. It'll come later when it's meant to. So with that, let's get back to the wheel now that we know how best to move forth. And then, one last thing too. So we're going to be talking about retrogrades today. And Jupiter is already retrograde. They've been retrograde since October 9th of 2024. And we'll talk about what retrograde planets mean and all that. Mercury is going to be retrograde very soon. And another caveat, if you in your own birth chart, if you have Mercury retrograde or Jupiter retrograde, then these retrograde transits, they might not hit you in the same way that they hit others. It might be easier for you. You might actually find that you feel more aligned or better or more productive or like things are moving along just fine for you during a retrograde if you have that in your birth chart. That's the last caveat about personal stuff. So with that, let's get into talking about some overall themes. Anytime we have retrograde planets, so on that note about retrograde planets, experimentation and doing things differently. So over the next 2 months, we're already in this, by the way. I'm recording this a little bit late. I probably should have recorded this at like the beginning of November, but now that we're in it and we're going to be in this until pretty much January, these stories that are involving Mercury and Jupiter. Experimentation and doing things differently, being open-ended, having beginner's mind, if you're familiar with that terminology, because there's going to be refining of ideas, a shoring up of loose ends, coming together of things that maybe we've missed in the past. And that can really be helpful. And then if we're doing, just as we saw anciently a planet moving in the opposite direction that we expected in the sky, it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting to see that. Likewise, down here, we can see things moving along differently at a different pace, doing methods differently. So be open to that. And don't try to get too tied to doing things in a certain way between now and the end of the year in 2024. And then on the opposite end of things, in terms of like productivity, there can be challenges, there can be misunderstandings, there can be miscommunication, miscommerce. So buying and selling is a very mercurial thing, versus understanding is a Jupiterian type of thing. Communication is really, I mean, Mercury, Jupiter, it's this kind of pair that we need. We need the information, we need to bring it together to have it make sense, right? So all of these faculties might be a little inconsistent for the next 2 months. We might be having misunderstandings. There might be illusions with retrograde planets too. Sometimes they can show us things that we think are there or that are going to work out in a certain way, and then they don't. So that kind of goes back to point one about being open-ended about stuff and experimenting and trying new things, but also because sometimes there's going to be a little hiccups or snafus or things like that. And that's normal. And that's just part of the deal. And it's, it's to be expected. And again, if someone's worried about that, like if you have to do like your thesis dissertation or something in the next 2 months and you're like, I need my communication to be like on point. If that's you, again, remember maybe Mercury or Jupiter are not part of your profection year. Maybe they're not loud for you this year. And even if they were, something that requires as much polishing as like a revising or a shoring up of information like one does when they do a dissertation, it actually kind of fits. So I guess last point about retrograde stuff. Look around your life and just ask, does this fit? Because sometimes it's like, oh, I'm coming back to this poem that I've worked on like 5 times before. It's a piece of writing from the past. So Mercury retrograde, retrogrades in general, can often bring things back from the past. They can have us redoing things, doing things again. And so if what you're up to the next 2 months in November and December is a redoing, a refining, a revision of something that you've already been working on, that can just fit, and then don't let it scare you in moving forward or doing things. So I think with that, let's get into some datey dates about Mercury. Now, today, as I record this, Mercury is at 19 degrees of Sagittarius, but it's the 19th of November. But Mercury actually entered Sagittarius on the 2nd of November, and they're going to be in there until January 8th. So this is, when I say 2 months, I mean, a lot of that is just because Mercury is going to be in the same place, retracing a lot of steps for the better part of the next 2 months into January 8th. On the 7th, Mercury entered their pre-retrograde phase at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. So this is where Mercury will eventually, they're going to station retrograde and come back to this place and then station direct and go forward again. So as of November 7th, we've got Mercury in their pre-retrograde phase, pre-retrograde shadow, some people call it. And on the 25th of November, so coming up here, if you're listening to this, I'm going to post it in the next couple days here. So you might be listening to this beforehand, but we're going to have a retrograde really soon on the 25th. And that will happen at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. And that will last until the 15th of December. Oh, that'll last until the 15th of December. So if you have holiday shopping to do, I've mentioned this in my past forecasts. Now it's kind of too late, but I was advising people to get done with this kind of stuff as soon as they could. Know that things might take a little bit longer than you're used to. Now, last holiday season for sure. I want to say the one before as well or around it, we've had Mercury retrogrades. This is not our first rodeo. We've had Mercury retrograde around the time of holidays. Do your best to just not do stuff at the last minute. That is usually a good way to get in trouble during a Mercury retrograde. My protocols generally go as follows. We underpromise, we overperform, we leave for stuff early, try not to schedule yourself back to back. If all the technology is fine, the traffic's fine, sometimes there's some other curveball that comes in, like, needing to gather emotional composure or something like that for a moment. So having that extra buffer time is really good. Yeah, what else? That's not it. That's not the end. So on the 15th of December, we've got Mercury stationing direct. And then on the 2nd of January, that's when Mercury will be done retracing all their steps and they will get out of the post-retrograde phase. And then we've got another few days and then they're leaving the sign and entering Capricorn. So that is the story arc of Mercury. And then knowing too that I guess I did miss one thing. On the 5th, there is a Mercury Cazimi. So on the 5th of December, there's going to be a Mercury Cazimi, and we're going to see the rebirth of not only Mercury and Mercury topics, but we can have a rebirth or kind of a reset button for Mercury ruled places like Gemini and Virgo. So that is another big date to have on your little chronological map. Now, if you haven't picked it up, Mercury is about communication, exchanges, travel, technology. They're also about music. They are about lies sometimes, traditionally speaking. They can be about exchange of info, ideas, words, and the like. So buying, selling, commerce, planning, getting facts straight. That's where we need to be extra careful in November and December of 2024. Just make sure, especially if you are doing holiday gatherings, everyone knows where to meet and when, and don't assume people know because they probably don't. Or if you think you know, just double check anyway. That's usually really good protocol as well for Mercury retrograde. And, with Mercury then being in Sagittarius. So looking at what style of Mercury do we have going on at this time? We've got a fire Mercury that wants to act, that wants to do something, including speaking. Speaking is an action. Like your vocal cords are doing stuff. There's energy coming out of you. So it can be a very fiery, active type thing, speaking can be. So Mercury's going to want to say stuff. And in Sagittarius, there can be a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, which isn't a bad thing. But when we've got inconsistency in both facts, reason, logic, inconsistency in understanding, or the ability to have the understanding that we need and all the facts we need to even try to understand, when all that stuff is kind of faulty, you can imagine that we could get ourselves in trouble with this one for sure, verbally. Now, I think it is a great time to, it's definitely a great time. It's always a great time to have critical thinking, to go back to the drawing board and shore up anything you're uncertain about or unclear about. That's just always good advice. But I feel like this combo being there in mutual reception, so their Jupiter and Mercury are sharing each other's signs, which I need to talk about that in and of itself, and I will. But in short, not to bury the lead, it makes them function a little bit better. And then it opens up this opportunity, I think, to really question bias and use, especially in the United States, the political climate that we have right now. Questioning bias is a really, really healthy thing, I think, for all of us. And I think that this can help us to do that, to look at things differently, to try thinking about things differently, and to definitely do that process before stating something loudly and widely. It can be a re-understanding of things for sure. And I think that it could be, and I've already honestly seen it be really fruitful for myself. So one example that I've had so far has been in examining this theory of nonviolent communication. It's been really interesting. It's been a great year of looking into that as a method of communicating through things. But especially since Mercury has entered in over the last 3 weeks into Sagittarius and entered into this mutual reception, I have just had all of this new information come to me about the pitfalls, the challenges, the things to watch out for, the reasons why maybe it might not be great in every situation. So it's been really, really helpful for me already in just really rounding out my knowledge, but I had to be open to that and saying that, sure, there's always more to take in there. So I think we're already seeing some of the themes just with information and knowledge. Just again, everything's retrograde. These planets are not being resourced to do things how they normally would do. And so there's just this air of doing things differently and being experimental in the air. Now, and not fact checking yourself before you wreck yourself, essentially. Now, Jupiter, their goodwill, their friendship. Let's talk about Jupiter for a minute. They've been in Gemini since May 25th of 2024 until June 9th, June 9th of 2025. We get them for a year in Gemini. And while Jupiter does like to be in an air sign, they have some other dignities in Gemini. Overall, it's not their favorite place to be. They're in detriment. They're very far from home. And so, just like Mercury, also in detriment, antithesis, very far from home. That being said, I mean, it's a planet that is in charge of understanding. And in Gemini, they're getting a lot of information and the ability to be able to understand, but it is a lot for them to sort through. So, it's hard for Jupiter, who's in charge of affirming things, to be in a place that is in charge of questioning things. Debate team champion, Gemini. They're seeing all the different ways it could be, all the potentialities, the both and. And Jupiter's like, you need to pick a right answer. And Gemini's like, there is no right answer. We're just going to sit unreconciled about this. It's tough for Jupiter. Jupiter likes things to be reconciled. But they're about goodwill and friendship as well. So I like to see Jupiter being goodwill, being part of this equation as well, that hopefully we can give each other the benefit of the doubt a little bit in November and December if we need to. That being said, okay, again, coming back to these retrograde themes of inconsistency, goodwill might be inconsistent. So do not count on people giving you the benefit of the doubt, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but love to see him in here. That's good. But we need to dial down, I think, the expectations of Jupiter because they are in Gemini, they're retrograde. Maybe let's dial them up a little bit again because of this mutual reception, but it's still tough. Still tough. It's not like how we're going to have it when Jupiter's going to be in Cancer. And this was part of my Jupiter and Gemini workshop. Kind of one of my headlines was tempering our expectations of what Jupiter is going to be doing in there. Not that they can't do and won't do amazing things, but if we're using the doctrine of Hellenistic astrology by those measures, it's not their easiest place. We can still have really neat outcomes, but it takes a little bit more elbow grease. So coming to understanding, coming to goodwill, it might take just a little bit more effort than usual, but the potential is absolutely there. Expansion, of course. So expansion of understanding, freedom from difficulties, basically deliverance from difficulty sometimes instead of, pure abundance or expansion. Jupiter's just stabilizing whatever it's around at very least. And Jupiter can also be about, we've mentioned knowledge, but also justice, the law, the spirit of the law. It can be about having high rank or wealth. So a lot of those, again, we now use words like abundance, but literally like being in charge of stuff, being seen in good standing in your community. All those are Jupiter things as well. Jupiter wants to, in Gemini, say what it knows. Jupiter wants to say what it knows. Jupiter wants to explain the details of the things. So we've got two sides of a coin here where a lot of good conversations could happen between November and December. But let's just be temperate about our expectations about it and be creative and open-ended with the life topics that we're going to be talking about with each of the specific rising signs. All right. So Jupiter's retrograde, again, they're retrograde. They started on October 9th of 2024. They're going to continue to be retrograde until February 2nd. So that's going to be a feature of this entire 2-month period. Again, that's part of why we're going to say, okay, some inconsistency with Jupiter themes and really like getting swept up in excitement, getting swept up in exciting potentials, getting swept up with big headlines. We're going to need to also be cognizant of that, I think, as well in November, December of 2024. A little similar to like fact checking yourself before you preach something. Similarly, just that excitement and enthusiasm that Jupiter speaks to getting scattered or getting into directions that are more of a distraction or a dead end. So I think we're getting the picture painted here. Some other Jupiter dates, they're going to be exactly opposite the sun, kind of seeing the middle of their cycle on the 7th of December, which is interesting because that's right next to Mercury's Cazimi on the 5th of December. So 5th and 7th of December are getting flags for me then. And then we're also going to see Mercury and Jupiter oppositions. So these are probably one of the more important sets of dates here. You know, we've got Mercury's storyline, we've got Jupiter's storyline that, I mean, really extends until next June of 2025. They're going to be in here. But their relationship specifically. Now we're going to see the biggest increases of this energy on the 18th of November, which was yesterday. I'm recording this on the 19th. The second of the three is on the 4th of December. And then the 26th of December is the final Mercury Jupiter opposition. And so all of these themes of little details, the big picture, what we understand versus the details and the facts, those themes, if those storylines are coming up, they're going to be the strongest on these dates, the 18th, the 4th, and the 26th. So looking at if you're waiting for information on something to come through, if there is something that is still confusing or you're still trying to sort through something that's complicated that you're like, oh yeah, it's these areas of life that we'll get to in the rising sign horoscopes. Look for these plot points, November 18th, December 4th, December 26th. That is going to really help to shape whatever those stories are. So just be paying attention around that time, and that should provide some kind of insight around those days. So now we're seeing December 4th, 5th, and 7th being important. So that first week of December is looking pretty important in terms of our understanding, our having the right facts and knowledge to move forward with things. Final little set of dates. I'm not going to talk about these in detail as I'll be talking about them in my forecasts for December. But we've got a Sagittarius new moon on the 1st of December, and we've got a Gemini full moon on the 15th of December, right with Mercury's direct station. So there's really just a ton of activity. There's so much activity. Yeah, let's look at these lunations. So here we've got Sagittarius new moon on the 1st of December. And then on the 15th, we're going to have a Gemini full moon. So that's the same day that Mercury is stationing direct. So lots of activity. So, you know, if you just throw all of those dates out and pretend like I didn't say any of them, which I know can be kind of overwhelming, and you're listening to the rising sign horoscope, if you take anything away from this, just listen to the house topics, listen to the life topics that I mentioned, and just watch those life topics in November and December and see what unfolds. That's the punchline. That's the message. We just need to clock where this is coming out in your life, and then you can watch and see how that unfolds and know that there's something about information involved or something about understanding involved, you know? So, and being open-ended about those things, or plans, being really open-ended about plans in those areas of life. So don't worry about the dates if it's overwhelming. We're going to get to be talking about life topics that is involved for you very soon. So let's see now with Mercury Jupiter opposition. Here's some other things to watch out for and to notice. Getting swept away with those bigger themes or getting swept away with an exciting potential and forgetting about the little details that are going to be involved, or just in that excitement or speed, like the pace being too quick, and then details falling through the cracks that are really pivotal. Um, Getting kind of overly optimistic about things, that too. And then likewise, on the other end of that, getting so hyper fixated about certain particular details that we miss the wider picture. So getting really lost in the forest through the trees, or losing the forest through the trees, however you say that. So with the mutual reception of it, it does give me hope that it is more of these constructive, putting things together, putting the small details together with the bigger plans, not getting swept away with one side or the other, the small or the large of it. The mutual reception makes me feel like it could be more constructive, but I'm still just like very skeptical because these planets are not well resourced. It's like two friends, neither of them are well resourced. It's like I can't give from you out of an empty cup, from my empty cup into your empty cup. That's not how that works, but we can maybe give each other some encouragement. So it's at least modestly helpful, the mutual reception. Holding debates lightly. I think this is one of my last points here. I'm going to link below one of my favorite suttas that I've run into so far on my journey that really helps with speaking and knowing when it's a good time to speak, knowing when it is skillful to hold a conversation and how you're ready to do that or not. So I'll link that below, the Kathāvatthusutta, if I'm saying it correctly. And that can be a really aspirational, it's like a tall order. So don't, when do I ever meet everything in that sutta? So don't feel like you have to be like a perfectionist about it, but it gives you some idea for things to watch out for and notice. That could be signs that it's not a good time to have a discussion or not a good time to share what you're thinking, and looking really and being thoughtful about why we are opening our mouths. Am I improving on the silence? Am I doing this to fulfill something that is inside of me, or what is the purpose of it? And as long as we're tied in with that Jupiter, that Jupiterian kind of why, should be okay. But if you need extra help, that sutta should be pretty helpful. That's linked below. And then knowing too, I guess, on that spicy note, so Jupiter has been in the bound of Mars for a minute. And they are going to actually leave the bound of Mars and enter the bound of Venus on the 1st of December, approximately. So that means that whatever Jupiter's maybe trying to say, what it understands, it's going to be doing so with more of that sharper edge, but also precision. Like it could help with precision and focus, but more of that sharper edge before December 1st. After December 1st, we start to see Jupiter going into a bound of Venus where things might get a little more temperate, a little bit more diplomatic once they get they're going retrograde, they're going backwards right now. So once they get out of that 17 degree and get into the 16 degree, they should be a little bit more diplomatic. Last astrological point before I get into the rising sign horoscopes, Neptune and Saturn. So squaring this whole business, if the retrograde wasn't enough, if our planets of info and understanding being in detriment and retrograde wasn't enough, we've also got that being squared by Neptune. So Neptune is squaring this whole thing, throwing in another ray of confusion potentially, or obfuscation, or, some level of misunderstanding that is unnecessary. That the potential is here. So that just adds more in terms of just needing to be diligent and careful about Mercurial and Jupiterian things. And Saturn is also squaring this, which, okay, Saturn can pump the brakes. Saturn is doubt. Saturn can be that helpful, doubtful mechanism that says, hey, do you have that correct before you say it? It can also be hypercriticism. So hypercriticism getting thrown into debate land. High standards, changing standards, that's moving of the goalposts in a debate. Like I can see that happening. Yeah, just be aware. It's just not. November and December are a little tricky. They're a little tricky to navigate. So that's why I'm talking about them right now, because I figured we should probably talk about it. And then secrets, I guess, too. It's interesting because both Mercury and Jupiter are in these places of like whistleblowing and saying stuff and not keeping things to themselves necessarily. And Saturn is the Lord of Secrets, though. So it's like, there's this tension between what to say and what not to say, what to keep to the self, when to be reserved, when to let loose. So that is here too, and it is in this T square, creating a bit of tension. So just, be wise about the battles that you walk into or choose to get involved with over the next couple months. And just know that you could be wrong. We all need to be aware that there's a possibility that we could be wrong about something and be open to that. Now, overall, couple points, just retrogrades, planets that are not super well resourced, being open-ended, keeping your plans open, being kind to yourself and others, not overscheduling yourself, under-promising, overperforming, being aware that there could be challenges, misunderstandings, miscommunications, and that really until, at least the 15th of December, if not the 2nd of January, some of these ideas, plans, communications might be up in the air or a bit messy, and that's okay. And stuff will all be pretty much wrapped up by first week of January 2025. I can't believe we're almost there. It blows my mind. I've been working on the weather for 2025, and I can't believe I'm already working on the weather for 2025. So with that, let's start talking about rising signs. We have Aries rising. Now, for Aries, this is going to be in your 3rd and 9th houses. This is an axis that has to do a lot with education and learning, traveling, ideas, beliefs, and the embodiment of those beliefs. It has a lot to do with communication in your local space, third spaces. It's not work, it's not home, it's all the other ones. Um, and Jupiter's been in this 3rd house of familiar people, places, things since May. They've been helping to stabilize that area, support or grow that area. And just this month, we've had Mercury up in your 9th house of belief, advanced education, long distance travel. So it's been going on for a little bit. Now, as these planets come together, we want to think about how these topics are being refined, reworked, reconsidered. What new things are you learning? What new things, maybe you're teaching something new as well if you're a teacher. What beliefs are being reviewed? Maybe the rituals or the regular practices that you do about your beliefs, maybe those are being reworked or refined. Maybe something about your short distance travel or long distance travel plans are being changed. And so keeping things open-ended, being as flexible as you can with travel, being as flexible as you can with communications over the next couple months is going to really help you. And not getting too solid or set in a certain plan or outcome really between now and the end of December. Now, especially if you're traveling during holidays, if you're in Aries rising, this is the classic, you're going to see this most in your travel department, both Aries and Libra rising. So you have to leave early for the airport, most likely, or you don't have to, but that's what I would do. And if there's, a rerouting, a detour, a miscommunication, go with the flow as best you can on that. That's what I have for you, Aries rising. And I guess, well, maybe one last thing. Depending on who you are, you may have the midheaven and the IC in the 9th and 3rd houses. So sometimes people have this MC, this midheaven, and it's actually over in the 9th, or the IC is actually in the whole sign 3rd. In that case, some of these changes or refinements around communication, challenges around travel or communication, revisiting of beliefs or ideas, it could also have to do with your career, your work, your life path, as well as your home, your family, your private life. So bringing in even more topics to consider for Aries rising, depending on who you are, but don't leave that out if that's you. Thank you, Aries rising. Good luck. Now, if you're a Taurus rising, this is going to be happening for you across your second and eighth house axes. Jupiter has been in your second house for several months now, helping to stabilize resources, income, money, helping you get your needs met, at least modestly, getting some modest help there from Jupiter. And Mercury, just for the month of November here, has been entering into your eighth house of shared resources, other people's things and stuff, and the place of sharing and collaboration. It's also the place of end of life topics, whether that's inheritance, estate planning or management, medical advance directives, the actual end of life process. All of that stuff is also eighth house. So any of those topics might be louder, more apparent in November and December. That's if you're looking at taxes, debt, complex finances, investments, stocks, insurance, anything like that where there's like a pooled resource. Mercury is going to be resorting and working through things there. So if you're retooling your investment portfolio, if you're making any changes or experimenting with how you're doing shared assets or complex assets, yes, that could be a thing. Keep it open-ended, over communicate when it comes to agreements, especially between November 25th and December 15th. For Taurus rising, be extra careful about negotiating agreements and that everyone is on the same page, everyone's read the fine print, and no one's forgetting any details, and that we all know what to expect. So any reworkings of your money, other people's money, double checking things with money or other people's money, and then maybe more abstractly beyond money, the second, the eighth, just having to do with anything that's yours, that's a resource, anything that can be exchanged. So that can also include time, energy, talents, skills, pretty much anything. So November and December for Taurus and Scorpio rising could be a really fruitful time of renegotiating agreements with friends, lovers, business partners, clients, whoever, so that those relationships are more sustainable, more reciprocal, more fair. Be a really good time to do that kind of repolishing of that, if that's helpful or needed for you. I think that's it. That's all I have for you for Taurus rising. Now for Gemini rising, this is across your first and seventh houses of self and the other. So your identity, your mind, body, and spirit has been a bit fortified or shored up by Jupiter since May. Jupiter is helping maybe even bring self-understanding, clarity of self, some sense of confidence or a sense of well-being. Sometimes Jupiter's understandings can be difficult, but it's generally better to understand than to not understand. But sometimes it can be more of that harrowing understanding with Jupiter. Either way, especially if you're a day chart, probably they have been helping. And in November, December, we're going to have Mercury in your seventh house, really activating partnerships, other people in your life. Lots of communication with others, busyness with others during November and December, and just making sure that you're over communicating, they're over communicating, no one's assuming that everyone knows where to be at the right time, and just doing your extra to make sure that everyone's read the fine print and agreements, what you're sharing together. So with the first and the seventh being activated by a lot of the weather in November and December, look at ways in which you can refine your partnerships, reconsiderations, renegotiations in partnership that are really just natural and necessary. The longer a relationship or a partnership goes on, the more likely at some point it's going to need retooling, tweaking, little changes here and there. So this is a good time to look at those things, what needs changing, what needs updating in my relationships, and then communicating through those changes. And yes, there can be misunderstandings, but that's okay. And then giving the benefit of the doubt, as Jupiter can help us do when those little bumps in the road happen. I think that's what I have for Gemini rising. Um, Good luck, Gemini. And then we have Cancer rising. Now, this is going to be across your 12th and your 6th. So, really, the axes of health, labor, animals, and suffering, and the navigation of suffering. And so, looking at the next 2 months as a time of experimentation with health, whether that's your upkeep routines, how you maintain your health, your physical health practices, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health practices, all of that is up for review. All of that is up for refining, polishing, trying new things, keeping things open-ended. So if you try Qigong or something and it doesn't quite hit you, that's okay. Just discard it, on to the next thing. When it comes to labor, making sure that everyone's on the same page at work, that there's over communication. This is where at work, under promising, over performing, we don't want to overschedule, overbook during a Mercury retrograde season. When it comes to just daily matters of chop wood, carry water, the chores and duties of the day, do your best to check all the details, cross your T's, dot your I's, and be kind to yourself if things slip through the cracks. I think sometimes with Mercury retrograde, especially, it can just be an increase or an intensification of Mercury for a little while, where it's like if I get a billion emails, yeah, it's the return time, the response time is going to get slower because there's just so much. It's not that, things are going wrong or there's definitely communication snafus. It could just be the sheer quantity of them that's slowing things down. Sometimes that's the case. When it comes to pets, watching out for any kind of misunderstandings, confusion here. If you're getting medication for your pets or yourself in November and December, definitely, I'm biased, but speak to the pharmacist. Don't skip the consultation. Definitely ask questions, read the instructions a billion times, make sure they make sense. Errors happen horrifyingly all the time. So, Cancer rising, just be alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic when it comes to your health, and be open ended, and you should be just fine. Let's see what else I'm missing for them. A really good time too to bring together these areas of life, seeing this mutual reception here. It's like, how can we bring together and meld the mental, emotional, spiritual health with the daily tasks, with the regular tasks? This is like meditating while you're doing dishes. This is like doing some push-ups in between your clients, this is like that kind of stuff. Like, how am I bringing the 6th into the 12th and the 12th into the 6th? So it can be really fruitful in that way, I think, melding these two areas, especially for 6th and 12th house considerations. When it comes to suffering, I would say this is where we have kind of an overlapping Venn diagram with spirituality and how some of these ways of believing or ways of thinking about the world can help us navigate suffering and make sense of it. And this is a great time to shore up loose ends if you've been, say, learning about a system of belief, or you've been learning about some kind of spiritual development process. Really polishing that up, refining it, making sure that you understand everything about it. That would be a great use of Jupiter in the 12th here, retrograde. So those kind of spiritual studies make sense. It's bringing your 9th house stuff into the 12th. Okay, Cancer rising. Good luck with this. And then we've got Leo rising. So Leo rising, all of this action in November and December is happening for you across your 5th house and 11th house. 5th house of children, rest, creativity, fun, pleasure. The 11th house of groups, group expression, our hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Kind of when they're going well, the 5th and the 11th are fun. This sometimes, Mercury bringing things back from the past can be a game or a fun thing that you used to do or a rejuvenatory activity that you used to do. It can be bringing back old friends, old friend groups. It reminds me of how I have a brother and his friends used to do this, like, I think they still do this Nintendo football tournament. And this is an old gaming unit. It's very much this kind of activity. So anything from the past that's coming back, that's fun. Looking at the ways in which you express yourself creatively and reworking those creative processes, reconsidering self-expression. Maybe you've been wanting to express yourself in a certain way and you've been holding back. Maybe November, December, you can help sort out, it can help sort out how to express yourself in the ways that you really want. And especially when it comes to who you express yourself to or which groups you're expressing yourself with. Maybe it's a group mentorship thing or a class or a creative class or a creative troupe of some kind. There's so many ways that we can express ourselves with others, around others. And it's a good time to look at that as well and see if that is how you like it, if anything needs to be renegotiated there. But how can we bring these two areas together really nicely with whether it's, how to bring the children into the hopes, dreams, and aspirations, or how to bring artistry or creativity into your aspirations, whatever ways we can squish together the life topics that you have going on in your 5th and the 11th, it might be a fruitful time to do that. If you have a creative project in the works, this is a good time to experiment, to plan stuff open-endedly. So don't get too tied to any certain creative outcomes or with your children. If you're trying different things with your child, really trying to be not tied to outcomes between now and January 2nd, January 8th. Just let things be kind of open-ended and in the works, in process, really for 2 months. When it comes to sex and romance as well, same thing. If you're dating, being experimental, trying different things, dating different people than you would normally date, going to a different place for date night. If you're with someone, kind of same things, I guess, depending on your relationship structure. But trying different things for fun too, trying different things in the bedroom, being experimental, being open-ended with sex, creativity, pleasure, that corner of the 5th house as well. Over communicating. This is another one, over communicating when it comes to these topics as well. If you're doing stuff with friends, if there are a lot of events or busyness with children, just making sure that everyone's got their ducks in a row and that we know where we're going and when we're supposed to be there. And last thing for Leo rising. Now, if by whole sign houses, you've got your midheaven in the 11th whole sign house, and if you've got your IC in the 5th whole sign house, then November, December might also really activate themes of career and your public life, home, private life, and reshuffling or changes in those areas of life, or a refinement or a renegotiation of career and family, or public life, private life. So watch out for those kind of 10th, 4th house themes coming in as well. Leo rising, if you have the midheaven IC axes in your 5th and 11th. Good luck, Leo rising. For Virgo rising, this is in your 10th and 4th house proper. So really a renegotiation potentially, or a refinement of what you have going on in career life versus home life, public life versus private life, a renegotiation of all the things that you're doing related to like parents, your past versus where you're headed in your future. So if any kind of communication needs to happen with parents, family, with home, renters, landlords, anything to do with your home situation, make sure you're over communicating, making sure you're reading the fine print, and just being extra cautious about getting swept away with excitement. If you're like looking for a house in November and December, really make sure that the realtor isn't rushing you, or that anything like that isn't getting kind of lost in the fervor or the excitement, especially like that, because we want to make sure we have all the details with 4th house things. This could be a time to experiment, to do things differently at work or at home, trying different ways of balancing these areas of life, of home and work, past, future path. And then finally, ancestry. You know, so many times I learned new things during Mercury retrograde. I learned things that I had kind of circled around before, but didn't quite get to. So, any new information coming in November and December about parents, home, family, ancestry, intergenerational themes, be looking out for that. New facts can come in. And making sure as well with these topics of home, these conversations with parents or family, that everyone's fact checking themselves, that we've got the ideas straight, and that we're not, again, kind of getting swept away with enthusiasm on certain things too quickly. Thank you, Virgo Rising. Good luck. So with Libra Rising, this is going to fall in your third and ninth house axes that really have to do with learning, teaching, travel, short and long distances, familiar places, unfamiliar places, beliefs, the embodiment and rituals about those beliefs. So a really fruitful, interesting axes to have as a highlight for November, December. This is the classic if you're traveling for the holidays, leave early, over communicate plans. If there's traffic, yeah, that can happen. Under promise, overperform, double check all the details, double check the fine print. When it comes to learning new things, this feels like the enthusiasm of the convert and the fervor to spread the gospel. There's just so much enthusiasm and excitement. So that can be great for channeling that energy into a new hobby, a new ritual, a new learning practice, like just channeling that energy, just making sure it's not getting too scattered, or that you're saying things prematurely or without full understanding. And that goes for people around you as well. So beyond you, the third house is siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, familiar people, neighbors. It's people in your community and your environment. And they may be overly excited, forgetting to read the fine print, getting too excited without full understanding. So keeping everyone just kind of giving things a little bit more time before we agree or affirm or things of that nature. And when it comes to understanding, it's like getting new understandings, getting new information in November and December, and keeping our mind kind of open, holding things lightly. Not that we don't care. Like, you can totally care very heavily and still hold things lightly and be able to kind of be flexible and adaptable with thought and idea. And that's really the name of the game here, I think, because these are such a, the configuration itself is so much about facts, ideas, understanding, stories. And it's in the places for you, Libra rising, for both Libra and Aries rising. It's in these places as well that have to do with thought and belief and worldview. So really just strongly those topics potentially coming forth. If there are new learning paths that you're on, if it feels rocky at first, if you're on some steep learning curves, hang in there. It is probably going to start to feel a lot better after, say, December 15th, even better after the 2nd of January. So if you're on any steep learning curves, definitely just give it a couple months. And I'm curious to see how you'll feel after Mercury is stationed and gone through its stuff. With travel, I know I already mentioned some things as well with exchange of deliveries, mail, communications, mass communications, publishing, regular email communications, giving it extra time, doing your due diligence. And if you're just inundated with a lot of communications, just doing your best. You can only answer so many messages in a day. Sometimes this type of configuration can just speak to a lot of busyness and communication, and that can increase delays or things falling through the cracks just naturally. Okay, Libra rising, good luck. I hope it goes very well for you these next couple months. And we're going to get to Scorpio rising. So this is going to be about your second and eighth houses of your things and other people's things, your resources, other people's resources. And it can go beyond money. It can be skills, time, talent, energy. The eighth house can be collaborations, how we share with others or how they share with us. The eighth house can be complex finances, end of life topics, whether that be financial, inheritance related, estate management and planning, medical advance directives, so many things, the actual end of life process. So, very much money, death, taxes here in the second and the eighth. So, what are we refining, renegotiating, changing when it comes to money or how money is shared? Any new understandings or new information coming in around that help you decide how to manage your resources or how to share resources? If there are any kind of requests that are outstanding when it comes to debt, taxes, or resources or money, it might not be wrapped up until the end of December. Especially, okay, December 15th, we're seeing things wrap up from a lot that could be up in the air financially. But then, especially once we get to January 2nd, I expect most things to be resolved if there are outstanding issues with money, taxes, debt, but certainly not in November. It could be a much longer story. So just giving things time to work themselves out financially over November and December, and knowing that there's going to be some twists, turns, and changes in that story. So giving it some time and holding things lightly there and allowing for new understanding and new information to come in. If there are challenges or communication around money, communication around finances or resources, over communicating, making sure that we're not getting too carried away with ideas or anything we're enthusiastic about before reading the fine print or getting all the details. So not signing on that dotted line for that loan until you have a good understanding of what is entailed, for instance. Um, could be new understandings around death. We're looking at Jupiter in the eighth, new understandings around any of those esoteric or occult topics, and doing things differently, so trying different ways of managing your money, trying different ways of sharing, trying different ways of collaborating, or trying different ways of approaching end of life topics. All of that would be great to do during this time. And as well, like looking at any kind of biases that we might have around those topics, because especially around death and money. I mean, it's kind of funny because the modern astrologers always talk about the eighth house being taboo. And it's like, well, honestly, yeah, like what's more taboo, at least in the West, than talking about death and money? No one wants to talk explicitly and openly about these things. So maybe for Scorpio risings, I mean, Scorpio, you're already so good at having some more of these difficult, complex conversations, but this might be a time to do that around death, taxes, and money. All right. Good luck, Scorpio. I hope it goes well for you these next 2 months. And we shall talk to Sagittarius rising. So this is in your first and your seventh. So a lot of focus in November and December on your relationships, your partnerships, you and the other, the understandings that you have with you and your partners, understandings that you have in your partnerships, uh, trying to fact check yourself, conceptually check yourself, make sure everyone's on the same page, whether that is about more important, bigger topics in the partnership, about values or beliefs, or whether it's just about, where we have to be and when for your Aunt Gladys's holiday gathering. So just make sure there's over communication. Don't be afraid. Even if it's annoying people, it's fine. Just making sure everyone is on the same page and understanding, and leaving things open-ended. If say you're dating or you're in a relationship where you're not quite sure how things are going, or there's some renegotiation of that relationship in November and December, keep it open-ended till, I would say, till January. And then by the time we get to especially December 15th, but especially into January, we should start to see how these areas of self and other are going to flesh out. So hang in there with any kind of open, outstanding relationship things. hold space for doing things differently in partnership, hold space to learn things and learn new things about yourself or others in partnership, and over communicate during this time. Good luck, Sagittarius Rising. I wish you the best. And let's talk to Capricorn Rising. So now we've got Mercury and Jupiter in your 12th and your 6th, these places that have to do with health, labor, animals, the navigation of suffering and challenges. And when we have planets here that are retrograde, there might be a way of doing these things differently. So over November and December, if there are challenges, but also opportunities to try new things, that could make a lot of sense. So with your health, trying new things with your health, being open to experiment with your health, with pets or those types of routines that you do to take care of your pets. You might be having new understandings, getting new information. Maybe you're getting Fido a different food or something during this time. But leaving things open-ended, I would say, until at least the 15th of December, maybe till first week of January, to see how matters of health, labor, pets are going to shake out, if there are some tinkerings or experimentations going on there. With labor, definitely over communicate. Check yourself with facts, with understanding of things. Be open to new understandings of things when it comes to your work or your labor spaces or people that you labor alongside. There could be new information coming in or a new understanding coming in or something that we didn't realize before, which can be really helpful. With any kind of work plans, projects that you have to do at work, it might be kind of an ongoing process November and December. So if things aren't wrapping up before the holidays, and that's kind of frustrating, yeah, that could be the case. A lot of these plot lines are going to stretch into first week of January. And then with health and wellness as well, there's a way of really bringing together these areas that could be very complementary in terms of melding the physical health regimens with your mental, emotional, and spiritual health regimens. So very much like meditating while washing the dishes, doing a movement-based mindfulness practice, really bringing together the 12th and the 6th in complementary ways. That's another fruitful possibility here. But if you are trying new things with spiritual, mental, emotional health, and some of it's not landing, some of it's not sticking, that's a-okay. Anytime we have a retrograde, we are really looking at planets that, they might have to try something more than once. They might have to really give it a little bit of elbow grease before they find what's going to work for them. So give it some time and give it some experimentation. You don't have to get it right away. I know Capricorn Rising likes to. Last thing, we know that there is this bit of this T-square with Saturn in the 3rd. And so, maybe some of the experimentation is happening because the environment is a bit limited, or there's some kind of challenge in your local space that requires you to be creative when it comes to your health. So there's a lot of ways that could come out. Just be flexible, be adaptable with pets, health, labor to the best of your ability until January. All right, Capricorn Rising, thank you so much. I think that's all I have to say. Um, mm, yeah, that's it. Thank you, Capricorn Rising. Good luck. And then we have Aquarius Rising. So this is falling across your 5th and 11th houses. Mercury and Jupiter are going to be refining, renegotiating matters of creativity, matters of self-expression. They perhaps are going to be refining creative processes or even like how they're expressing themselves in a group. It might be a renegotiation of what groups you are a part of. What friendships you have. There might be some negotiations or things changing there. There could be a revisiting of things in friendships, a revisiting of old friends, or a revisiting of things that one used to do for fun. So sometimes a retrograde planet in the 5th can speak to older forms of recreation that were fun, or anything from the past that you used to find entertaining can come back. So that could be what's going on right now. When it comes to romance, keeping things open-ended in November and December, trying new things, dating new people, dating people you wouldn't normally date, going to different places on the date, doing different things for date night, all of that tracks. So it's not all going to stick, probably. That's okay. If you go to a restaurant and it's not excellent, try something else. But you might have to be flexible. You might have to be adaptable. You might as well lean into it, I suppose. Try new things, be experimental. And if there are relationships where you're like, I'm not quite sure how this is going to turn out, I don't really know if this is the exact person, might be that it's more clear after that December 5th, December 7th date, even more on the 15th, especially by January. Should be really clear in terms of dating, romance, self-expression. When it comes to children, experimenting with children, if they're going through anything, if they're learning new things, if they're on learning curves, really just supporting children through that right now. Or if you're on any learning curves related to childcare, be kind to yourself. It's going to be 2 months of learning, experimenting, tying up loose ends, a lot of times learning things that we've tried to learn before, but maybe now they're coming around and it's landing. So whether that's, again, your child that's going through that or you, just knowing that, yeah, that's natural part of learning is not knowing stuff, and should be a bit, the learning curve should lighten up a bit by end of December. So hang in there in that way. But otherwise, it can be a really fruitful time of just trying new things for fun, trying new things with friends, over communicate with friends, over communicate with groups, over communicate with your children and with your love interests. Make sure you're all going to meet at the right place at the right time. Classic retrograde stuff could ensue, but we know that it's going to be pretty concentrated to your 11th house of friends and groups, and 5th house of children, creativity, rest, romance. And one last thing for Aquarius rising, if you are someone who has your midheaven in the whole sign 11th or your IC in the whole sign 5th, that is also going to mean that some of these refinements or renegotiations of expression, creativity, changes with children, friends or groups, that also might bleed into shifts or refinements around career, life path, as well as home, private life, family life. So just be aware that I know we already were dealing with a lot of topics of life with the 5th and the 11th, but we can actually also bring in even more between home, family, private life versus career, public life. All right, that's it for Aquarius rising. Let's talk to dear Pisces rising. And Pisces, this is going to be across your 10th and your 4th houses. So renegotiation or refinement of the balance between your home and work life. So trying different things in regards to career versus home, public life versus private life. If there's anything that's shifting in those topics, that would make a lot of sense. Any changes in understanding about what works at home. Sometimes we learn things and it's like, oh, that would be what would make this home environment function better. Or with parents, maybe there's new understanding that helps those parent relationships. But I would just advise in November, December to be open to new understandings about 4th house topics, be open to understanding new things about parents, home, family, ancestry, intergenerational themes. And also in your career life, on that path with public matters, open to new information, open to learning new things. And that should help us really refine these areas over the next 2 months. This is the classic leave early for work, leave early for the family gathering. There could be delays, challenges with communication. So just over communicating with everyone at home and work, basically. And when it comes to public presentation of anything, really double checking and knowing that you may have a typo, and that's okay. It's going to happen eventually to all of us. There are high impact typos, like the wrong decimal place on a medication prescription. That's a big typo. Most other typos don't actually matter, except they hurt our pride and our ego, and it sucks. So if that happens, if you have a public typo, Pisces rising, it's okay. You didn't kill anyone. So just to put in some perspective. But I know that they suck. So just do your best. Going too fast, I think, is going to be the folly for a lot of us during the November and December timeframe. Just too quick of a pace. So as long as you're doing your best. What else about this? I think those were the main things. So experimentation, keeping things open-ended until January, um, being open to new information or new understanding that's really going to help us refine these areas of life. And best of luck. Oh, last thing, things from the past. So especially in the fourth house, which already has to do with the past, if you do end up in November and December learning new things about your, not only your own past, but say your parents or your grandparents or your whole ancestral lineage, that could be a thing during this time. So keep your head on a swivel for those types of conversations. Thank you so much, Pisces Rising. Good luck. Good luck with everything. So I think that's everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can always donate if you feel so inclined and have the capacity. I do have a link for that below, www.aligninglightastrology.com/donate. And I just want to thank everyone for your energy. Listen to your own rising sign. Listen to the rising sign of your loved ones. Listen to all of them just to get a feel for what is coming in the skies ahead. I like to do that sometimes to really drive the point home. And if you have anything to share, if you have any situations in your life that are happening, you can put them in the comments below if you're comfortable. I like to just add in terms of that astrologer good, kind of, even if it's a difficult thing, it's like, wow, but it really fits the astrology. Yeah, and for example, I'll share one of my own insofar as I am an Aquarius rising. And what this has been a bit for me, it was partially a pricing change. So I just changed my prices. That was one kind of my creative output and career related shift or renegotiation, reconsideration. I have also been reconsidering a rebranding. I've kind of gotten back and forth on what I might do. I was going to completely get rid of my pen name. And then I got a horary done by one of my astrologers to all. They're amazing. I'll put the link below if you need horary astrology. But they advised against it, actually. So now I'm kind of back to square one. Like, how do I how do I operate? What's the best course of action? So I'm currently trying to renegotiate, refine what is my self-expression and how I want to do that publicly and with groups. And I have a feeling that it's going to be a more than oneness. So, maybe that's a good last place to wrap it up here. I wish you all a great month of November and December ahead. I am going to do a more succinct forecast for each of those months, but I just wanted to single out this axis of Gemini and Sagittarius for a place where there's just going to be a ton of activity and it deserved its own conversation. So thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday season. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of each other. Be patient as you possibly can, and I hope everyone has some peace this holiday season.